Good. I don't know whether I should say good evening or good morning. So whatever, I'm happy to be here to share a little bit of what I know on menopausal health to all of with all of you. I wish I knew how many of the members are from US and how many are from India. I have no idea. So in any case, I will start with menopausal health with a little bit um, about how it affects the lives of women. And menopause, as you all know, is a very complex event. It involves not only biological, psychological, sociological, and cultural variables are there, and it involves all of them. And that's why in different communities, different countries, different cultures, the menopause is viewed differently, and the menopausal symptoms are different. The approach to menopause and the way they handle menopause also is very different. So what is menopause? Basically, it is absence of menstrual periods for 12 months. So one whole year, if a woman doesn't get her periods, then we presume that the woman has reached menopause, and it is usually due to the decline of the reproductive hormones. And the age at menopause also differs in different countries. In India, it is around 46 to 49 years. Now it is actually getting more and more delayed, whereas in the Western world, it is much later. So before we go into what menopause does to the body, I would like to, for all of us to know about what is happening in our body throughout our reproductive life. That means from the time we start our periods till the periods are ending. So this is, there is a cyclic release of hormones in our body. So this is one area in our body where things are happening every month. It is not like in a factory where, once the production starts, it will go on and on for years. It's not like that. It is a small, every month there is a different thing is happening. So there is controlled cyclic release. So these hormones, especially the estradiol, all of you know this, the estrogen is the one which is giving the youthful look for the woman. And that is estradiol during the reproductive period. So this goes up during the cycle, mid-cycle, then around middle of the cycle, LH goes up, that's when ovulation happens. So if there is no pregnancy happening, fertilization, after ovulation, it is the progesterone hormone along with estrogen. The red line is the estrogen. The green one is the progesterone after ovulation. If there is no pregnancy, both these hormones come down and then the woman ends up having a menstruation. And again, next cycle, again the estrogen goes up. So this is how every month cyclically it is happening, except when the woman is pregnant or when a woman is lactating, she is feeding. So around perimenopause. Perimenopause is a period which starts at least 5 to 7 years before a woman reaches menopause. That means that 1 year of no periods. Before that, even 5-6 years, already the estrogen levels are coming slowly down and down. That is because this is the uterus, the ovaries and the tubes. So the ovaries are actually, it's nothing but like a basket containing all the eggs. So the woman is born with a set of group of eggs, and these eggs are being used up throughout her reproductive period. By the time she reaches menopause, these eggs are exhausted. So each time an egg is released, the ovary is also producing the hormones. So it needs an egg for the hormones to be released. Once the eggs are gone, then the hormone, the estradiol, is not being produced. So around perimenopause, what happens? The number of eggs are coming down. So the periods start becoming irregular and the woman may not be ovulating. So with all this, the endometrium will get affected. See, this is the lining of the uterus. With the estrogen, this endometrium becomes thicker and thicker to receive the pregnancy if the woman gets pregnant. So once there is no pregnancy, it gets shed through the cervix every month. So when the ovulation becomes irregular also, this endometrial thickness also varies. It may be thick or it may become thin. And because there is no ovulation, progesterone is not produced. Because progesterone is not produced, the way the endometrium is shed is also irregular. That's why the woman can have prolonged bleeding extended for 5 days instead of 5 days. 10 days, 15 days, and it can be heavy. In not all women, but in those who experience it. Once the woman reaches menopause, after menopause, there is very little estrogen. So here again, what we have to remember is this estrogen, the female hormone, is produced through a male hormone. So first the body produces the male hormone, the androgen, and that gets converted into estrogen. So after menopause, the ovary does not produce estrogen, but it will continue to produce some androgen. And this androgen is important because very important to remember. This is important to maintain the woman's some amount of estrogen in the body by getting converted in the fat into a different kind of estrogen, not the estradiol. So post menopause, from the ovary, hardly any estrogen, only androgen little bit. And because of that, the lining does not become thick, it remains thin. There is no estrogen to thicken the endometrium, so there is no period. So this is how, I hope you understood the cycle. So what happens with this, that estrogen is the panacea. With estrogen, the woman has so many good things in her life. The effect, once the estrogen goes down, it affects the quality of her life. Basically, her physical strength comes down, sexual interest goes down, her interest in socializing also comes down. Women after menopause are little hesitant to socialize. They don't go out so much. Emotionally, they become, for everything they break down, or they become very emotionally very sensitive. And most of them turned more spiritual because they're automatically in that age, their mind goes towards spirituality because of the lack of estrogens. But before menopause, a small few points I wanted to tell you about this fertility and perimenopause. A lot of women think, okay, I'm now 45, I may not get pregnant if they are not sterilized. Even though ovarian reserve rapidly falls after 30 years, from the age of 30 itself, the eggs, quality of eggs starts coming down. The number of oocytes, the quality of eggs comes down. Higher risk for miscarriage, chromosomal abnormalities, and pregnancy complications, because as the woman is aging, she can become hypertensive, diabetic, all those can complicate her pregnancy. But one must remember that there are still chances of getting pregnant till around 40 to 45 years these days. We are getting patients at 45. They think, madam, we didn't realize, we thought we are in menopause, but when they come, they are already 4 months pregnant. So these things can also happen. So we have to bear that in mind. Coming to the perimenopausal bleeding abnormalities. So as I mentioned, around at least 15 to 20% of women experience this kind of bleeding abnormalities during their perimenopausal period. Usually it is the short cycles, common thing. So if a woman comes to me at 40 years and she says, madam, I had every month I used to get once in 30 days my cycles. Now I am getting at 25 days, sometimes 22 days. Then I know that her FSH is going up, and that means her ovaries, eggs, ovarian reserve is coming down. So one of the important signs to tell us that patient is going closer to menopause is short cycles. In some women, it is delayed cycles. Usually in little obese women, it is delayed cycles. And sometimes when the cycles are delayed, they can have prolonged or heavy bleeding. Some women come with intermenstrual bleeding. That means between the periods also they have some kind of spotting. And some have painful periods. Earlier it was normal, but now periods are becoming more painful. And it is also associated with mood swings because of the waning hormonal levels. The woman's moods also keep changing. So what are the common causes of perimenopausal bleeding? Mainly is this anovulation. As I said, the eggs are coming down, so half the cycles patient is not ovulating because there is no ovulation, no progesterone, and the period may get delayed, and then it can get prolonged and become heavy. Then fibroids. These are small tumors you can see here in the uterus. These are the small fibroids, can be seen in women after 35, 38 years. Because nowadays women have only 1 or 2 or maximum 3 pregnancies, but the uterus is designed for a lot of pregnancies. So when it has nothing else to do, and every month so many hormones are being produced and they are getting released and acting on this endometrium. When there is no work for it, then some cells inside the muscle can get hypertrophied, some genetic changes, and then these fibroids can grow. Sometimes we find polyps. The endometrium itself becomes thicker and becomes a polyp-like thing, and then every month bleeding may be prolonged, or between periods. Usually polyp patients have bleeding in between periods. Then you can have adenomyosis. Adenomyosis is nothing but this endometrial lining here is going inside the muscle, and every month when the patient is bleeding normal from below, she is also bleeding inside the muscle of the uterus. So these are patients who develop painful periods. Earlier they never had pain during periods, but around menopause sometimes they will have painful periods. And if this endometrial ovulation does not happen for a number of cycles, the endometrium becomes thicker and thicker and becomes hyperplastic. So this is sometimes can lead into a precancerous lesion, the endometrial precancerous for endometrial cancer. And later on it can progress into endometrial cancer. So some women have these bleeding problems. Rare causes are when there is some coagulation problem like platelet deficiency, or when the woman is on some mitral valve replacement or some clotting problem, so they are given blood thinners. So these patients also can have excessive bleeding. That is because of our medication, secondary to the medication. So how do we investigate whenever they come? A patient comes to us with this perimenopausal bleeding, first thing we take the history. Depending on the history, we can arrive at a diagnosis. Is it anovulation, or is she very obese, so there is hormonal imbalance? Then examine physically to look at this is the cervix, the mouth of the uterus. So normally if you see, this is the outer part which is pale in color, that is having multiple cell layers. Inner is darker pink. So this is the endocervical canal. So this junctional zone is called the transformation zone. This is where cancer of cervix can start. So whenever there is in the sexually active woman, there can be this human papilloma virus and other viruses can be deposited in the vagina. And when every month due to hormonal cycles, this transformation zone is active. So at that place, this virus can get incorporated and cause a cancer of the cervix. So we need to look at the cervix, take a pap smear. That's why in the US you do pap smear every year, I suppose. But in India we do once in 3 years, and if it is normal, once in 5 years. Then an ultrasound scan, we can pick up if there are any fibroids, adenomyosis, polyps, all those things. Then earlier we were going and doing DNC, that is dilatation and curettage for excessive bleeding patients. But after the ultrasound, we are picking and choosing cases. We don't do DNC so often. If we have to do, we would prefer to do with a hysteroscopy, that is look inside the uterus, to put a scope inside the cervix into the uterus, see if there is any pathology and try to take a piece from exactly the point where there is a problem instead of doing a blind procedure. So then we take the biopsy from that site. So managing perimenopausal bleeding, most cases need only medical management. So if there is hormonal imbalance, we correct with the hormone. Sometimes we put in a Mirena intrauterine device till you reach menopause in that period to reduce the bleeding. If the scan shows a polyp like this, we put a hysteroscope inside, look at the polyp, cut the polyp and remove it. So management depends on the cause and cost. Sometimes it may be little more expensive, and risk benefit analysis we have to do. What is it the patient is going to go through? Is it going to be a malignancy or it's a benign condition? How long we can wait? Can we correct the anemia and give medication and not treat her, do any further management? And the patient's choice. Sometimes patients don't want to be troubled with all these problems. So it all depends on their choice also. So now we come to the actual menopause. After they go through this phase of perimenopausal bleeding, then we go into the menopause stage. So here again, as I mentioned, menopause does not happen in one day. In some people, the bleeding happens once in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and again they will get a period. Again after for 1 more year they don't get. So it is in each woman it is slightly different. So it is called the menopausal transition phase. So here there is a lot of vasomotor instability because of the hormones are coming down. All the hormones, it's like, every cell in the body has these hormone receptors. So when the hormone is there in the body, it is affecting all the cells of the body. So when the hormones are coming down, especially the vessels on the face and periphery, they all have instability. So suddenly they become dilated. So they will have hot flashes. Suddenly middle of the when in the day when they are sitting in the AC room also, suddenly they feel very hot, the whole face gets flushed. And in the night when everyone is comfortable, the patient will have lot of sweating. And they also have these menstrual problems which I mentioned earlier, and early psychosomatic symptoms. So they start becoming little more dull and depressed and very sensitive. Very small things they get irritated with the children, with the husband, with the friends, all these things. So next is actual menopause, where the periods stop. That's when slowly the hormone, as I mentioned, the estrogen comes down. So they can have genitourinary atrophy. Again, the same vasomotor symptoms can continue through menopause. Then there is weight gain. Patients say suddenly, all these years I have never gained weight, madam. Now I am putting on weight. I am doing all my exercises, diet, everything. Still, I feel I am gaining weight. Then osteopenia. That means the bones start becoming weaker. Then after 1 to 2 years, then the actual menopause has set in. Then slowly the woman can become osteoporotic. She can have cardiovascular disease. Then even neuropsychiatric, so brain dementia, memory loss, all these can also happen. So if you see this woman here, she's standing erect, straight, and her posture is so good. Then you see that's how the spine is. Then her abdomen is also flat here. After menopause, slowly see the abdomen is bulging out. So there is the fat is getting deposited here around the midriff. And the spine, because the bone is becoming softer and softer, it is getting bent. So she's, see, Dowger's hump, they say. So slowly is becoming, the height is coming down. The woman's height is going down. She's bending down forwards and the abdomen is bulging. So these are all changes that happen to a woman during menopause. This is a very important slide. This is called insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. So this is exactly what happens around menopause. So the woman becomes insulin resistant. That's why after menopause, suddenly there will be a lot of fat around the midriff, around the abdomen. So what is insulin resistance? Insulin, you all know, is the hormone which brings down the blood sugar levels. So when glucose enters the blood vessels, then from the blood vessels, it's going into the being utilized by the cells. So to enter into the cell, the glucose needs insulin so that it can enter inside. So in these patients, when there is insulin resistance, the insulin does not function well. So the glucose cannot enter into the cell. So it remains in the blood. So there is more glucose in the blood than what goes into the cell. So what happens when insulin resistance is there? In the ovaries start producing more androgens, so male hormones. So in the postmenopausal lady, this male hormone will go into the fat, and in the fat it will get converted into another estrogen called estrone. Estrone is what is produced in menopausal woman. It is a much dilute form of estrogen. So the potency of this estrogen is very low, but it is good. It takes care of her, the skin, the heart, the brain. So if you see a woman who is little fat around menopause, her skin is smoother than a woman who is very thin. Very thin women look much older because their skin becomes wrinkled, then their bones become more weaker, they become bent down forward. So all this happens. So little bit of weight gain around menopause, you should be happy. What happens with the insulin resistance? As I said, abdominal girth increases. The triglycerides, levels also go up, slight hypertension, increase in fasting blood sugar because of the resistance. So how do we manage? Prevent and management of this insulin resistance is important. That is by lifestyle modification. We must make sure our blood pressure is below 120/80 in the normal range. If it is more than 140/90, antihypertensives have to be used. And then lipid profile, this is something we need to check. Our LDL is the bad cholesterol, should be less than 100. And HDL, the good cholesterol, should be more than 50. And triglycerides must be maintained around 150. And if you have any diabetes, family history of diabetes, this is the time when your sugars may go up, so they should be brought under control with our lifestyle itself. Why should we do? Why should we treat insulin resistance as a risk factor for cardiovascular disease? RIF can also get deposited in the liver, so it can cause liver dysfunction, fatty liver, cirrhosis, all these problems. Then diabetes, hypothyroid. Then if the woman becomes very, very obese, she can become sleep apnea, develop sleep apnea and hyper estrogenism, because so much fat, so much androgens, then the endometrium can become thick, she can go in for endometrial cancer. All these problems are expected. So lifestyle changes are very, very important. So lifestyle changes again means diet, change in the diet, and maintain a very balanced and healthy diet. Definitely exercise. This lifestyle is important all through our life, but around menopause, we have to put in more effort because our body is slowing down. To do the same thing, we have to put in more effort. So follow the proper diet, exercise regularly, mostly in the morning hours you must exercise. Only then you will get a good night's sleep. Then stress management again is very, very important. So when the nutrition, so there is change in metabolic needs around menopause, because you're gaining weight, your metabolic rate is coming down, body is slowing down. So you don't need that much food what you needed when you were much younger. And there is, as I said, redistribution of fat. Fat is more around the midriff. Insulin resistance is there. All these are happening. So we need to take food which will reduce this and try to help our body maintain good energy levels, muscle mass and other things. And at the same time, nutrition is important because this is the time when there is empty nest syndrome. Earlier, women were cooking for the children, for the family. The children have left for college, or they have got married and left the home, or sometimes bereavement may be there. So there will be loss of interest in cooking and eating also. So the nutrition value in the food also comes down because of these social factors. So for a healthy menopausal diet, for a sedentary women, we say 2000 calories, but most of these calories must come from fruit, vegetables, whole grains, lentils and beans, because they contain lot of micronutrients which are very good for maintaining the immunity and the health of the woman. So for non-vegetarians, fish is a very good source. Then flaxseed, cinnamon, fenugreek, soap, these are all, these substances contain phytoestrogens. Phytoestrogens are nothing but naturally occurring estrogens in our food grains. So if you eat more of these, then you get some more estrogen from your diet also. Then snack on nuts like almonds, walnuts, dates, figs. These are ones which are healthy for you. They can give you a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, which are not produced in the body. So you eat lot of nuts. Then use blended oil rich in monounsaturated and omega-3 fatty acids. So you have to use this kind of oil and consume at least 500 to 600 ml of curd or milk. If you are lactose intolerant, then maybe curd in the form of curd, or some people can't tolerate curd also. Then in that case, you may have to take calcium tablets. So glycemic index, I just mentioned this because a lot of people now in the West, you think you know more about it, but these are the high glycemic index foods which you should be avoiding. Moderate glycemic index foods you can take, but ideally you should be taking these Low glycemic index foods, which are bran, cereal, oatmeal, peaches, lentils, milk. Sweet potatoes is another very good source of carbohydrate, which has a very low glycemic index. In South India, a lot of we used to eat. I remember eating a lot of sweet potatoes as a kid, but now we hardly eat this. So these are all things which we must get back into our diet, which will improve. These are low glycemic index foods also help because they contain lot of fiber, and this fiber is something in our intestines. The fiber is the prebiotic, we call it. So in this fiber, the bacteria in the gut will thrive, and these bacteria are the ones which produce some good chemicals for our body. They also produce good mood elevating chemicals. So calcium rich foods, you know, but one of the important things is till our nuvulu, which we eat, contains lot of calcium. Milk, of course, horse gram, drumstick powder. Now we are recommending moringa powder to take in diet. Curd, and rajma, crab, all these contains lot of calcium. You know about protein diet, of course, non-vegetarian, milk proteins, egg, tofu, nuts and legumes. So dietary modification, take lot more calcium in because you are losing. So the bone strength, we should remember to maintain good bone health, the thing starts right from childhood to adolescence. From year 21 to 22 years age, the peak bone mass occurs. Till 30 it is maintained. From 30 years onwards, slowly body is losing calcium actually. By the time menopause comes, the loss is much greater. So you have to have calcium intake more because you are losing more calcium around menopause. And protein intake, at least 1 gram per kg body weight. So if you are 60 kg, at least 60 grams of protein per day. Avoid excess salt, caffeine, and vitamin D, try to take supplements. And excess salt, you all know, can cause cardiovascular diseases, obesity, osteoporosis also gets worsened with excess salt, Alzheimer's, stomach cancer and asthma. This is one more thing which all of you must remember is sarcopenia, which we see after menopause. What is sarcopenia is nothing but loss of muscle mass. So suddenly a woman says after menopause, you find women shrinking in size, becoming smaller. So they feel that they are losing weight, but it's not actually weight. They are losing the muscle. So because of loss of muscle, that's why their metabolism also goes down. Muscle is the one which utilizes all your blood sugars and gives you energy. If there is less muscle, less utilization of carbohydrates. So even if you eat less, you are not losing weight. So in order to lose weight, you have to increase your muscle mass. So do exercises where weight bearing exercises, strengthening with belts, all those things you have to do. So what is the cause of sarcopenia? Again, low hormones, sometimes chronic disease like diabetes, hypertension. There is a low inflammation which is happening in menopause. Insulin resistance, and you are nutritionally deficient, not eating good food, that can cause sarcopenia. So the symptoms are again unintentional weight loss, you will feel exhausted, weakness. Our grip also starts becoming weaker. Our gait becomes slower. Our physical activity comes down. So to do every single job, you are putting in lot more effort. So to overcome this, you have to do exercises. The exercise recommendation, all of you must be aware, it is about 150 minutes per week. That means 30 minutes for 5 days. If you do, it is 150 minutes. If it is vigorous intensity, even 75 minutes is sufficient. And mostly, as I mentioned, there should be muscle strengthening exercises which can improve balance and also bone preserving. So our yoga in China, they do the Tai Chi. All these are very useful for strengthening the muscles and the balance, because after a certain age, older age people start losing balance. So they will start falling down and hurting themselves and fractures can occur. So weight training with resistant bands, all these are very, very important. So weight bearing aerobics you can do, which can be included 2 days in a week. So if you do 400 calories of exercise, if you burn every day, in a week's time, you can lose 1 pound per week. So that much of calories you need to burn. Coming to the sexual problems, these are also seen more around menopause. There is sexual dysfunction because it's the estrogen and the androgens in the body which actually stimulate the libido. Once the estrogen comes down, the mentally also the woman may not be interested in sexual activity. And the painful coitus happens because if you see here, this is the vagina in the premenopausal woman. So the vagina contains lot of erectile tissue. That means lot of blood vessels are there under the skin. And when the woman is aroused, more blood goes there and thickens this area. And these folds are there. The folds get stretched and there is fluid underneath the muscular cord. And this will enlarge the area and the satisfaction, sexual satisfaction happens. In postmenopausal, you see the folds are all lost. So there is no stretch is not that good. And the inner lining it becomes thinner. See, this is so thick here, it becomes thinner. And there is no interest. So whenever, because of there is lack of lubrication there, the woman will have pain. And because of the pain also, she is not interested in sexual activity. So before menopause, see how the uterus is, the endometrium, the vagina, everything. After estrogen loss, it becomes like this. So we tell our patients, so even after menopause, continuing to be sexually active is a good thing because we call what we call it, use it or lose it. So if you keep on having normal sexual activity, there is some amount of activity going on, the blood vessels remain functional. Similarly, brain, after menopause, use it or lose it. If you don't use your brain, you are going to develop Alzheimer's. So it is very important to maintain the lifestyle even after menopause. Sleep disturbances, again, difficulty in initiating and maintaining sleep. This is one of the important things that happens after menopause. Most women, when they come and they say their periods are irregular, I ask them, how is your sleep? If they say that their sleep is not good, it was better before, so that is also an indirect evidence that their hormone levels are coming down. So sleep hygiene measures. So you tell them to exercise in the morning, no exercise. Evening, if you exercise, your body becomes more alert. Then again to slow down and go back to sleep becomes very difficult. And lifestyle modification. So have dinner very early by 7 o'clock and then go to bed, read a book, listen to music. All these things help in improving your sleep disturbance. Coming to this I like these slides. Next 4-5 slides are my favorite slides because I like to tell our patients that these happy hormones, the oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin and endorphins, they're all happy hormones which our body itself can produce. So we don't need to take medication if you are low around menopause. You can improve your happy hormones. How oxytocin is called the love hormone. Basically, when a person is in love, that means if you have a grandchild in the house, small baby, you are all after the child, bonding, physical contact, every 2 hours you are hugging the child, lifting the child. So this jadoo ki jappi gives you lot of the oxytocin gets released. So it gives good emotional response in your body. So makes you feel happy. That's why people with small kids or pets in the house, they are much more happier because they feel responsible for another life. They are enjoying their childhood through them. So it is a good thing. Dopamine. Dopamine is again a hormone which is released with good gut health, good sleep, meditation, exercise, listening to music. This is, and in addition, you take food which is less saturated fat with high protein, expose yourself to sunlight, take lot of vitamins, and even a massage can increase your dopamine level. So you can do all these things to improve your dopamine. Then serotonin. Serotonin is a thing which is released by whenever you help others. So if your children are not there, no one at home, even if your servant's child, you can sit and teach her something, or you get your servant's children, get them married, educate them. All these things also improve your serotonin levels. you challenge yourself. You can say, okay, next 1 month I'm going to learn this new skill, or go for aerobic exercises, yoga. All these things improve your serotonin levels. And of course, endorphins. Whenever physical activity, when you do, your endorphins are released. Sexual activity, orgasm, they all increase your endorphins. So these are the things which are in your hand, which you can improve your production of these hormones in your body. Coming to urogenital symptoms, this is incidence is almost 15% of women complain of this. So they have some amount of vaginal dryness, some itchiness, and some of them have urgency when they want to go to the washroom. Before they go, they are unable to control, and that incontinence is there. Some women can have stress incontinence if they have some injuries during childbirth. Around menopause, till menopause, that hormone is holding those tissues properly. After menopause, when the estrogen is lost, the vagina becomes thinned out, all these problems can surface. So pelvic organ prolapse, if the uterus is lax, it starts sliding down slowly, and it can come out, pop out, and we may have to do surgery. Some women have recurrent urinary infections because in addition to the vagina, even the lower urethra, the lower urinary tract also becomes very thinned out, and because the pH also changes, so they keep getting recurrent urinary infections. So these patients, we give them some local estrogen creams to improve the vaginal rugosity, the thickness of this thing, and the lower urethral lining. So this will help. And cardiovascular disease, estrogen is also cardioprotective hormone. So whenever estrogen is there, as I said, the cholesterol, good cholesterol is there, HDL is high, LDL is low. When estrogen goes down, the woman is on par with the male for cardiovascular disease. So normally men are more prone for heart diseases than women. But after menopause, women also have the equal risk for cardiovascular disease. So one needs to go for regular screening for this lipid profile, check if they have any coronary blocks, and all these things have to be taken care of. Last, this menopause and bone health. So this bone, as I mentioned, peak bone mass occurs around 21 to 22 years. From 30 years onwards, slowly the bone starts losing the calcium. After menopause, it goes down much faster. Accelerated bone loss occurs 2 to 5% of bones loss per year in the first 5 to 7 years after menopause. So if you reached menopause at 50, from 50 to 55, you lose a lot of bone. So that is the time you must take care, do the exercise, do weight bearing exercises, take calcium, don't allow the bone to come down so fast. So instead of 5%, if you lose 2%, you are reducing your bone loss. Later on, the percentage of loss comes down to 1% per year. And this osteoporosis, whenever bone becomes weak, it's called osteoporosis. It is asymptomatic. Women will not have many complaints except some backache, chronic backache, things like that. So what is osteoporosis? The bone mass becomes low, the strength of the bone becomes low, and because of that, when she falls, she will get prone for fractures. So risk factors for this is age itself is a big risk factor for osteoporosis. Prior fragility, already she has had fragile fractures. Low BMI, very thin patients, as I mentioned, they have lower endogenous estrogen, so they have higher risk for fractures. Family history, it is there, and previous fractures. Smokers and alcohol intake also reduces the bone strength. So for this, we do one test called the DEXA screening, which is a gold standard test. So we do it 5 years after menopause. So that first 5 years, we advise good lifestyle, but end of 5 years only we do. No point doing it soon after menopause. Then if there is a risk factor, any of these risk factors, then we do it even before that, so that we can give some medications to strengthen the bone, like biphosphonates. And menopause and declining cognitive function. As I mentioned, estrogen is important. Even in the brain, it will make the synapses, the connections are very good. Once estrogen comes down, the connections are becoming weaker. So the woman starts having memory loss. So how do we prevent it? By having a overall good health, good cardiovascular health, because if your heart is good, then the heart pumps good the blood, and this will improves with good exercise. And then you maintain an active mind, always keep doing something, puzzles, crossword puzzles, sudoku, then learn some new skill, learn anything which you like, which you enjoy, you must do. Avoid excess alcohol. Then if you are a diabetic, keep your blood sugars under control. Lastly, screening for gynec cancers. So this is the age when women are also worried about cancers. So as I mentioned, for gynec cancers, we take the cervical, vaginal, vulvar cancers are can occur, of which cervical is most common. Vaginal cancer, vulval cancers are rare. They can be at least vulval cancer, you can see a lesion outside, but cervix you cannot. So we do pap smears, and depending on the pap smear report, if necessary, we do a colposcopy and a biopsy, and accordingly we treat. Endometrial, again transvaginal ultrasound, it is a boon. Once we have that, we can pick up if the endometrium is thick, anything more than 5 millimeters in a postmenopausal woman, more than 5 years of menopause, then we need to do a hysteroscopy to rule out any polyp or any cancerous lesion in the endometrium. So these are the things. And ovarian cancer, this is another thing which will be very late. Usually detection is quite late because it is inside the abdomen in the pelvis, and the symptoms are not exactly very clear. So most vague symptoms they have. So usually ovarian cancer, we feel that it is runs in families. The BRCA1, BRCA2 people have ovarian cancer, and breast cancer risks are higher. Angelina Jolie, you must have heard. So she got both her breasts removed, and then she also had the ovaries removed, and she started taking HRT. So annual pelvic exam, having an ultrasound done every year to see if the size of ovaries are normal and how the uterus is will help. So can get one transvaginal ultrasound every year, and annually one pelvic exam, internal checkup. If there is anything doubtful, then only you may need a MRI. And if then also we also follow up with blood for CA125 and other tumor markers are there. As and when required, we do those tests. For breast, again, now mammogram and ultrasound of breast both are useful investigations. Self-examination of breast, even every woman can do once a month and feel she will know her breast better. So if she can feel anything abnormal, better to go for an ultrasound and mammogram. If there is a family history, then you have to start doing the mammogram much earlier, from the age of 30, and every 3 to 5 years depending on the recommendation. So with this I end my talk. I think I will end with this words by Reinhold Niebuhr, who says, Lord, grant me the strength to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I think menopause is something, a phase where a woman can do a lot to overcome the difficulties which normal menopause most women face, and then enjoy life, because a woman spends at least 20 to 30 years of her life in after menopause. And according to the recent survey, people are most productive between 60 and 70 years, which is very surprising, because by then you have learned so many things all through your life, which you can put into practice. You can help. Now the support which you need to give for your family is not required. They are all grown up, your children, your family. So you're on your own. You can do all the things that you wanted to do in your life. And with all the skills and knowledge and efficiency you have learned all through your life. So I think menopause is a stage not to be worried about or feel scared of, but it is an opportunity which we should not waste. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shishkala Garu. And I don't know if you can see the screen, but there are already like a couple of questions in the Q&A section. If you want to just look at them and answer them, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Have them unmute, Abhi, so they can ask
Yeah.
questions directly.
Okay.
So
Okay.
why do Indian women get menopause early? That is the question. Vinu Ganti. Hi, Vinu. Indian women, I think genetically are more, they get their menarche early nowadays. And menopause has always been early in these women, maybe nutritionally, genetically, that the, we call it the thrift gene, where the nutrition was always low. I think that was responsible. But nowadays, we are seeing patients who are going up to 50, 52, 53 years also, and they're getting their regular menstrual cycles. So it is changing with good nutrition. I think the age of menopause, even in the women, Indian women, is going higher. When do you stop during pap smear? So pap smear again, in the reproductive age group, we do it more often because that is when there is a lot of changes every cycle, the transformation zone. So there is a higher chances of any precancerous lesion starting. Once around menopause, if the pap smear is normal, then once in 5 years is also good enough, because by after menopause, the transformation zone goes inside the endocervical canal. So after that, the chances of getting a carcinoma cervix are less, but still we do it once in 5 years or earlier if the woman becomes symptomatic. So we tell the woman if she's having any abnormal vaginal discharge, she must come even before for a repeat pap smear and a checkup. Are there any medicines for hot flashes? Yeah. See, a lot of times we give patients estrogens. Estrogen is recommended for severe hot flashes. That is only one condition where, medically people accept HRT. You can give for 6 months to 1 year to overcome. But if some women don't like to take because they're worried about their breast cancer risks, or they have heard so much about estrogen, they don't want to take, then clonidine is a medication which we give. It helps in reducing hot flashes, but generally lifestyle modification itself, it helps. Then phytoestrogens, every culture they have their own phytoestrogens available, so we ask them to use those phytoestrogens, and that can also help them. Now we do get phytoestrogen capsules also, so they are actually not medical the what do you say, they are out across the counter medications, but people do get relief with that. Definitely I can send these slides to all. This is anyway recorded. I think they can send it to all the participants. More questions? Yeah. Do you recommend any supplements to maintain estrogen levels? Yes, I think, estrogen is been more maligned because it is a hormone which really makes the woman feel very, very good. But when post-menopausal woman with a intact uterus, if we give estrogen, then that estrogen can affect her endometrium and she can go in for endometrial hyperplasia and even endometrial cancers. So these women, we also have to give them progesterone to prevent that. So when we give estrogen and progesterone, that is the combination which is bad for the breast. Progesterone is bad for, can cause breast cancer. So that's why if a woman is already hysterectomized, then you can just give estrogen alone. It is safer. And estrogen does a lot of good to a woman. All these WHI, all these studies have really maligned this hormone. It helps in maintaining the the fine tuning of the body is done by the estrogen. Such small quantity of estrogen does so much good for the body. We only realize when we lose it and all the problems start. Does the menopause age depend on family history? Can we push? See, it is not the family history. As I said, it is the ovarian reserve. So patients with good ovarian reserve, their menopause gets delayed. If their ovarian reserve is poor, it comes down. These days we are seeing lot of youngsters, 35, 38, going into premature menopause. Maybe because of the stress, the lifestyle, the poor nutrition, they are in the yo-yo diet. Some months they will eat more, some months they don't eat at all. They either exercise or don't exercise. All through the night they are working in BPO. All these, I don't know what is the exact cause, but oxidative stress, we call it, reactive oxidative species, ROS, can damage the eggs and they can make them lose their eggs much faster. So maintaining a good lifestyle, having, and always our body has to be tuned to the sun, to nature. So you do whatever you do, get up in the morning, exercise in the morning, and that is because our body's metabolism is at the peak in the mornings and it slows down like the sunset. See, in our ancient culture, we do Surya Namaskaram in the mornings. That means we exercise in the morning. We do Sandhya Vandanam in the night. That is, you pray and relax and you slow down. So listen to music, read books, have early dinner 7 o'clock, go to bed by 10. So tune your life cycle to that of the nature, to the sun. All these will reduce the stress, will maintain good hormones in your body, and will maintain all your the cycle, even the menstrual cycle and menopause also will not get start early. So is it possible to attain, we actually call menopause is, we reach menopause, we attain menarche, we reach menopause. So that means the menarche is something we attain. And when menopause is something we reach, it is the end of that reproductive life. So yes, as I mentioned, some of our patients, even at 38, 39, we have seen, they come, actually they married at 37, 38, then they come, they're trying for pregnancy. They say, madam, every 22 days I am getting my cycle. Earlier I was getting every 30 days. Then we do a second day to FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone. It is about 25. That means they are already in premature ovarian failure. So we are seeing. So that's why we have to make sure our children from the time of adolescent age, especially in India, I am very sorry to say, from 6th class or 5th class till they are in intermediate, they are all in tuitions from morning 7 o'clock till night 8 o'clock. Tuitions, no physical activity, and then some food, whatever the child comes home, she says, I've been working since morning, want to eat this. They will get that fast food, whatever, and give, and no physical activity, and more homework, stress. All these are adding to the burden. So are we are only concentrating on development of the brain, but not the body. Our body is not only brain, physical, mental, social, all these holistic development is not happening. So that is something, sometimes I feel, this COVID is giving us this chance to sit and reflect. Is it what we have done all these years, or is it right or is it wrong? Should we go back and think and then balance? It's not only earning money or getting a good job or trying to tell I have done this in my profession. So you should learn to appreciate even the smaller things that the children do, even if they do a small handicraft thing and then they show it, that is something they are happy to do and we have to appreciate it. So these are things I think we are over the years lost out. More questions? Anyone wants to ask something? Bone loss. What can be done to reduce bone loss after menopause? So to reduce bone loss, as I said, you have to improve your first. The bank account should be good. Then even if you withdraw something, it's okay. So you have to make sure your children do. We used to do this Tokkudu Billa, then even the swing, what is that? Swing festival. So the spine, the bone deposition in the spine happens in the adolescent period. So the swing festivals, Tokkudu Billata, all these games are helping improving the bone strength. So bone calcium deposition around adolescence. So that is very important. After menopause, continue to do weight bearing exercises, these stretch band exercises that will help. Muscles, when they are strong, through the muscles are attached to the bone. So when there is more blood flow in the muscle, from there, the calcium gets deposited into the bone. So what we have to remember is the bone that we have today is not the bone that we had when we were 5-6 years old. So there is a bone turnover. The bone is always taking in calcium, taking it out. So the entire bones have been removed and again reformed. Daily something is going out and going in. So 5-6 times we have recycled our bones in our body. So that is something is most people don't understand. So if you keep on exercising and maintaining your muscle health, your bone will be stronger. Phytoestrogens don't increase the risk of endometrial cancer unless you take in very, very high quantities or your endometrium is highly responsive to it. So basically, if a woman is on phytoestrogens and you are worried about endometrial cancer, go for a transvaginal ultrasound every year or once in 2 years. If the endometrium is less than 5 millimeters, that means it is not affecting the endometrium. Is menopause depend on mom's history? I have already answered. Daily intake of calcium and vitamin D at 40 years of age. At least 800 milligrams of calcium, 800 to 1000 milligrams. So you can get in at least 2 glasses of milk and some, you use lot of nuvulu, til and other things in your diet. And moringa leaves, all these increase your calcium. You can green leafy vegetables, you can get adequate calcium. But vitamin D, unless you expose yourself to sun for at least half an hour, 45 minutes between 11 and 2, you won't get. So I think vitamin D is something we need to supplement. These days, in spite of that, somehow the frequency of light which is required for producing of vitamin D, I think is not there because of pollution. So I recommend taking vitamin D supplements. In these COVID days, again, we are recommending vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc to improve the immune response of a person. Any questions? More?
So there are more questions. There are also other questions in the chat.
I'm looking at the chat now.
Okay.
Answered one only, open. I've opened.
So if you scroll down to open, there are more questions.
Yeah, sorry. No, I am not able to get the questions.
Okay. Give me just.
Can you read them out if you can?
Yes. So the next question is, do phytoestrogens increase risk of endometrial cancer?
I have already answered that. I said they don't normally. But if you are worried, go for an ultrasound, I said, annually.
So the next question is there a safe amount or quantity of estrogen hormone that can be taken to balance the hormones during premenopause and menopause? In
premenopause and menopause, it is not the level of estrogen is slowly coming down. So if there is this bleeding problems and the woman is also having menopausal symptoms, then these are patients we do give estrogen progesterone tablets. And some patients, they do well with these oral contraceptive pills, because oral contraceptive pill again contains estrogen and progesterone. I have had a few patients who were very depressed, and but they were not willing to go for HRT. But OCPs, when we put, she was so happy. One patient refused to stop even after she reached menopause. She said, for 2-3 more years, I want to continue. So these patients we keep monitoring with a mammogram and examination of the breast. So we have to always weigh the benefits versus risks. If they are getting lot of benefit without the medication, they are unable to do their day-to-day activities. She was a TV anchor and she was unable to do her day-to-day activities, and she was so depressed, crying for everything. Once she started taking the OCP, she was very, very happy. And she started exercising. She lost 10 kilos weight. She started looking good. And it really, it was a transformation. I kept telling her I should keep your picture in my clinic before and after. So definitely, yes, I think each one has to take that decision.
The next question is how to prevent early menstruation in girls at younger age, for example, 8 years old.
8 years old is a little young, but yes, we are seeing patients 9-10 years already starting to menstruate. The reason why it is one is its weight of the patient. If the girl is overweight also, there is a tendency they can start menstruating early. Second is the estrogen content in the food. Here in India, we get people buy milk from buffalo milk or cow milk, where they milk the cow and give the thing. So these people give hormones to the animals. So we have found few cases where this happens. So what kind of food you are giving? Is the food containing any estrogens? See, like phytoestrogens, in childhood, if you give a lot of phytoestrogens, they can start menstruating early. And third is physical activity. Are you giving them enough physical activity? Fourth is mental exposure. If they're exposed to a lot of TV things, even that stimulates their brain, then they mature faster. And then their pituitary starts functioning faster. So these are all the things that childhood, that innocence has to be protected for a longer period. Here we are exposing them to so many things. And that is also indirectly influencing the menarche period.
Next question is, I'm 41 years old, having spotting or little bleeding at different intervals from 49 to 51 days. I finished my pap smear ultrasound, diagnosed a small sized fibroid of 3.2 centimeters, and now they asked me to go through endometrial biopsy and endoscopy. Is this part of normal protocol? I'm tensed as biopsy is usually done for detection of cancerous cells, but they did not provide me any more information.
If the endometrial thickness is normal and still you are having intermittent spotting, then where is the site of the fibroid? Sometimes the fibroid is closer to the cavity. In such cases also, it's called a submucous fibroid. The site of the fibroid can cause bleeding. Second is endometrial thickness can cause bleeding, like this intermittent. Third is a polyp. So if you can do a 3D ultrasound or transvaginal ultrasound with detail, where is the site of the fibroid, what is the endometrial thickness, is there an endometrial polyp. Then the biopsy is done for cancer thing only if the endometrium is thick. If it is a fibroid generally is benign. Because of its site, it can cause bleeding. Polyp, sometimes it can have atypical cells also. So that also needs to be biopsy. In any case, it's nothing to worry about. But since you are having this bleeding, just go for a proper ultrasound diagnosis and then go for a hysteroscopy, and under hysteroscopic guidance, if their fibroid is seen inside the cavity, same sitting, they can remove the fibroid, hysteroscopic resection. If there is a polyp, polyp can be removed. If the endometrium is thick, then that can be biopsied.
Okay. The next question is, I am having TSH problem. Because of this disturbance, I'm not getting good results, but don't feel any symptoms. Am I in menopause?
Are you getting your cycles regularly? So TSH disturbance is, if you are hypothyroid, then you have to correct your thyroid with your thyroid replacement. How old are you?
It's not given. 41 years.
Thyroid problem can occur at any time, but around menopause it can become worse. So you have to recheck your thyroid levels and adjust them accordingly.
She's at 41 years.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, what vitamin should we take? Okay, I think you have answered this. What tests can be done if we want to determine a woman is reaching menopause? Is it FSH check?
Yes, FSH done on second day 2 of your period. If it is more than 13, you are in a younger patient also. If it is more than 13, we feel that it is the ovarian reserve is coming down. If you are in the reproductive age group also, but around 40, usually it will be more than 20. So we know you are nearing menopause. But it is not mandatory for us to do an FSH to tell your patient has reached menopause. So around 45, 46, if the woman has not got her period and for 1 year, and we take it, they have got reached menopause. But the main problem happens is after that first 3-4 years after menopause, a woman can still get periods after say 1 year no periods, then suddenly after 1.5 years she has a period. So earlier we used to label this woman as a postmenopausal bleeding and then do a D&C and to rule out cancer, all these things. But after the advent of ultrasound, we stopped doing, and lot of studies have shown that up to 3 to 4 years after menopause, occasionally even at menopause, there will be about 300 or 100 eggs in the ovary. So suddenly at some point the woman can ovulate even after menopause. So you might have heard of rare cases where a 50-year-old lady had a child. So this is rare ovulation later on. So this, when it happens after 1 year or 1.5 years, usually this woman experiences little breast tenderness, little vaginal discharge 15-20 days before her period. So that means there is some egg release somewhere, again estrogen released from that ovary and she got a period. So we do a scan, and if there's nothing in the endometrium is thin, we just reassure and send the patient back and ask her to come back after 6 months just in case. But otherwise, we don't do a D&C. So these are, with studies, we have realized that unnecessarily we have been doing so many things for patients earlier.
Is there a safe amount or quantity of estrogen hormone that can be taken to balance the hormones during premenopause and menopause?
Yeah, we do have these estrogens, which we give 1 milligram or 2 milligram per day. But as I said again, with an intact uterus, we cannot give estrogen alone. We have to give progesterone along with it. There are formulations with estrogen and progesterone, dihydrogesterone or micronized progesterone with estrogen, estradiol valerate it is called. So we give those hormones to patients who have lot of menopausal symptoms or who are very, very active and they find doing their day-to-day activity very difficult because of the lack of estrogen. So it is their choice. We cannot, I mean, without their asking, I cannot just put them on these estrogens.
The next question is, how many milligrams of zinc is recommended every day?
See, our body contains about 2 grams of zinc. Daily requirement is about 12 to 15 milligrams. So we are now recommending 50 milligrams per day, because at least from 50 we will get our daily requirement of 12 or 15 milligrams per day.
The next question is, I am 34-year-old. I'm suffering with vaginal discharge, itching and burning. I went to checkups and took the treatment for 1 or 2 months. It resolved, but again I'm facing the same problem. What is the main reason for vaginal discharge?
Vagina is a place where there are no glands in the vagina. It's a skin. But there are certain glands which open into the vagina. But most of the discharge is from the cervix. And this cervix, which I have shown you in that picture, that pale pink part is the ectocervix, the dark pink is the endocervix. So there, the endocervix has the glands. So when the endocervical glands come out onto the outside, so the dark pink part comes out, it is called an erosion. So there the glands will start discharging. Usually this erosion happens after childbirth. See, when there is a difficult delivery, prolonged labor, after delivery, the cervix has to heal and become normal. But in some patients, that erosion remains. And because the erosion is nothing but the inner endocervical lining, thin wall, it can repeatedly get infected. And then it can cause discharge and itching and problems. So these patients, we do a pap smear and then do what is known as a cryocautery, where we freeze the cervix. So the endocervix, which is on the outside, is frozen, and once it thaws, that whole area gets dissolved and comes out. This outside ectocervix will grow and replace that. So it will heal it, which takes about 2 months time. So for these 2 months, we ask the patient not to abstain from sexual activity, because there is a lot of repair going on there. So any foreign virus or even the sperm can get incorporated and again form a precancerous lesion. So once this is healed after 2 months, the symptoms go down. So you need to look at that. Or if the pap smear is showing already some atypical cells, then we do what is known as the leap excision. So with electrocautery, we remove that bit of the cervix which is unhealthy. And again, 2 to 3 months, we wait for the normal skin to grow and heal the whole area.
Next question is, how many years girls will grow after their puberty?
After puberty, once they start getting their first menstrual cycle, about 2 to 3 years they grow. After that, the epiphyseal fusion occurs and then they stop. So, whereas in the boys, once they start having their mustache and all, they will not grow. The height they stop growing. But girls, even after they start getting their first cycle, they will grow for about 2 to 3 years. Some girls grow longer. Again, as I said, depends on how much estrogen the girl is producing. If some girls, as soon as they attain menarche, their estrogen levels are quite high, then their fusion occurs. Then they don't grow much. But in some girls, even though they get their cycles, their endogenous estrogen levels are still lower. So then the fusion occurs little later. Till then they grow.
The next question is, I'm going to be 50 years soon. When will I get my menopause? It is past 2.5 years. For the past 2.5 years, I'm getting my periods regularly.
So maybe you will continue to get your periods till you're 53, 54. So generally ask what is the age when their mother or aunt, paternal aunt, father, sister. So you usually inherit either from the mother side or father side, your menopausal age. But it is not 100% because it all depends on your lifestyle, how you maintain your lifestyle. what is your body weight and what kind of nutrition you take, what is the physical activity, how your sleep is, stress. So many factors also influence it.
The next
So,
question is, sorry.
so maintaining a good lifestyle will, if it prolongs your menopause age, that means you are getting the benefit of the estrogen, your own endogenous estrogen, for a longer time. So that is the aim I think you should have. So, but if your family history is there and you have low ovarian reserve, you are reaching menopause early by 43, 44, I think that is, my personal view, if you ask, it's not what the literature says. You can maybe take hormone replacement for another 3 to 4 years or 5 years. So now what we are doing is, instead of giving the progesterone daily orally, which may affect the breast, we are also giving putting a Mirena, which is the progesterone locally for the endometrial protection, and give the patient some estrogen to help them through their menopausal period.
Okay, the next question is, will eating too many green leaves during menopause cause too much iron? How many green leaves is recommended to consume?
I don't think you will consume more than what is required, because green leafy vegetables are high fiber content things. You cannot take more than a certain amount. So immediately you will feel the satiety. So you can take any amount of green leaves are good. You can take. There's no limit for that. As long as you don't have any diarrhea or any other such problem, you can take it.
So I think we are done with the questions, but as you might see, we have several compliments, and a lot of them have sending, this is an excellent talk, very informative. So thank you, Dr. Shashikala Garu, and Atama, if you want to talk.
Thank you, Dr. Shashikala Garu. And Vakati, I want to have you explain a little bit about, during this menopause, people are having a lot of psychological issues and mood swings, and also depression. Can you able to explain a little bit of that, how to react for all those symptoms for them?
That's what I said. If they are depressed, there are two things. One is they may be having a psychiatric problem, which has been precipitated with the loss of the estrogen. So that is one thing we have to take in the history, family history. If there is any family history of people having depression and all those things, then we must think that there is a chemical mediator in the brain also. There is the serotonin is not sufficient. So we give some serotonin SSRIs. These are the tablets we give, which improve the chemical levels. So we can give them temporarily for few months, for 3 to 6 months, and see and stop and see. So when they stop again, if the symptoms continue, then it is better to continue that. But if not, give these for 3 to 6 months, and in these 3 to 6 months, give them the lifestyle modifications. As I mentioned, all those things which are increasing the happy hormones in the body. So you have to also counsel the patient, talk to her about the situation in the family, any issues are there, how to resolve those things. Then food, what is the kind of nutrients, micronutrient supplementation, physical activities, improve her sleep. All these things are important. So it is a multi-pronged approach, we say. So in addition, we also put them on these SSRIs. So basically,
thank you so much.
estrogen deficiency causes this problem. So definitely, if this doesn't help, we put them on a small dose of estrogen also, and which can and monitor them basically. And now we have we can have certain kind of designer estrogens, we call them. So they are called the tibolone and other things. They don't cause endometrial hyperplasia. They may have some effect on the breast, not very sure. But for patients, some of them have very low libido. So they are worried about that. And because See, each one has their own individual, so the tailor-made problems are there. So we have to give a tailor-made solution for them. So these patients, Tibolone is a very good alternative. We give that can be given for perimenopausal women from say for 3 to 4 years before menopause if they have severe menopausal symptoms, depression, all these problems. So we continue that till 4 to 5 years till they are say 47, 48 years. Then we reduce the dose and see if they are okay with it. We continue with the reduced dose and then taper it off around 50 years.
Thank you so much, Shashikala garu. Really appreciate all your webinar has been very informative for all the ladies. Thank you so much on behalf of Veda.
Thank you, Jansi. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm happy to share whatever I know about and with all of you all. Thank you very much.
And thanks to all the ladies that has joined today and everyone and each one of you for joining the webinar. Thank you so much.
I thank them all for their patient listening and for all the questions and made it more lively and interactive. Thank you very much.